communication. And the first thing that I want to mention is the importance of thinking about the why. So what is your personal motivation for wanting to make videos? And once you know that, what is your personal motivation for wanting to make a specific type of video about a specific type of topic? And in addition to that, what is the goal that you have with creating these videos about given topics? I know it's kind of maybe seems trivial and maybe it's easy to remember this when you're starting a process, but it's also kind of easy to forget about the why when you get really into it and start like creating things. So I just want to really encourage you to always go back to the why, because that will really drive you to create what you initially intended to do. It's also important to think about the who. So this is your audience, right? Who is the group of people that you want to approach and do you want to reach with whatever it is that you're creating? And so in order to understand your audience, you need to get a sense of their needs, their interests, their desires, how they want to obtain information, what type of information they're interested in, and then move on from there. Particularly when thinking about digital video, then we have to consider things related to who will be able to watch these things that we create. And so I'm showing you here, just as an example of these things that we need to consider with our audience, a map of the number of internet users per country across the world. And of course, we could think about the world-wide perspective, but also zoom into different locations in the world and see the same type of information, where blue here represents a high number, and then yellow represents a low number. So we see that there's an equal distribution of internet use and access across the world, and we should consider this when we're creating videos. Who is going to be able to see them? This map here then just shows a similar thing, the percent of population in each country that has access to internet. So the blues are high percent, and then the yellows are low percent. But on the other hand, so this is, the previous thing is more about, who will have access based on internet accessibility for digital video consumption. On the other hand, creating videos might lead to higher accessibility. So as an example of this, we have this idea of 4 balls bouncing at different rates. And if I tell you this sentence in English, you might be able to create a conceptual image if you understand English, right, in your mind. However, if you go into a more visual representation of that, then this is more of a universal version of representing that same concept. So we might be able to reach a higher number of people. Similarly, though, we should consider that not everyone is going to be able to see something. And so we have to consider visual impairment as a potential thing to be concerned about. And so audio is also important. And additionally, then, not everyone's going to be able to understand a given language. So subtitles in different languages might also be something to keep in mind if we want to address audiences that are outside of the language we started with. However, I should point that accessibility and access are not the only element to think about. And I want to use this opportunity to point you to an article that I think is almost crucial reading for anyone interested in science communication from 2020. And the title is here. When you get the slides, you'll be able to just find that. That says that efforts at inclusion often focus on access as the primary impediment to STEM engagement, and such oversimplifications fail to address assumptions about who belongs in STEM spaces. And they continue talking about it, but basically the main thing here is just to kind of like point out that if we only focus on access as the main barrier for science communication, we might fall into the trap of kind of patronizing our audiences and kind of assuming that the only reason they are not consuming the things that we are creating for them is that they cannot reach, that they don't have reach to them. Instead of saying, well, what if they don't even want to? What are their needs? What are their interests? What are the things that they want to hear about, and how do they want to hear about them? Instead of just imposing on them this idea that they need to come to our space. Here, I'm just providing you a reading list. So like I said, some slides will be just for me to go through quickly. When you get the slides, basically this is, I've curated a list of articles and different things for you to, if you're interested in audiovisual science communication, these are sort of primers on getting into that topic. And then we love our evidence-based recommendations. So this is just a list, and there's 2 parts of it, so 1 and 2. of different things that, drawn from the reading list from these articles and maybe a few others about, things that are recommended in terms of audiovisual science communication. I'm not going to go through any of them except the last one about building awareness of the different types of videos, genres, styles, and strategies that are out there so that you can critically observe them and draw inspiration from them. And so as an example of that, I'm just going to talk quickly about this study done by Boy et al. In Frontiers in Communication, where they analyzed a bunch of YouTube science communication videos, and then they organized them into 4 categories. They determined that they shared and were different in certain specific ways, such that you could classify all of them into 4 main categories. So a presentation film would be one in which a speaker who is sort of like a regular character that appears in a video series talks at the camera and explains a given topic, and they often have props that will help them explain such topic. A benefit of this type of film is that it enables personalization because there's this human there that's like regularly present. They can develop a connection and a relationship with the viewers and obtain feedback. But sometimes these videos tend to fall into this problem where the speaker is showing up on the screen at the same time as the whatever it is that they're explaining. So there's a split in visual attention by the viewer, and this tends to lead to poor transfer of knowledge. An expert film would be one in which you have a scientist, so that's the expert, who is just talking about a given scientific topic, and sometimes they appear on their own, and sometimes they appear in a interview type of format where you see both the expert and the interviewer. And usually these videos tend to make it hard for viewers to identify what is the relevant information that the producer wants them to get out of the video. So knowledge transfer tends to be low. Animation films are, like the name says, a set of representations, graphical representations that change over time of a given concept or topic. And because of this format that allows audio explanations and visual explanations to be synchronized in time and complement each other, this lowers cognitive load, and animation films tend to be good for transfer of knowledge. And finally, in a narrative explanatory film, I couldn't find just one frame to show this because it actually sort of combines all 3 previous ones. So you have a regular speaker that talks to the audience. They might be meeting with experts and interviewing them, and also using animations and complementary footage to convey some sort of story that they're trying to tell. And so because they're narrating something or telling a story, they grab the attention of the viewer and they hold it. So once they get to the explanation part, there's a better transfer of knowledge compared to some other types of videos. And so in addition to kind of like describing these different types of videos, the authors also analyze performance. And so they, for example, here they looked at average views per day, depending on the video type. And they found that presentation films tend to have the highest average views per day, followed by animation film, followed by narrative explanatory film, and followed by expert film with quite a low average views per day. And of course, they didn't make any correlations between sort of like the properties of the films and these types of performances. That's not the scope of the study. But this is all just to say that it's important for you to be aware of what's out there, how it performs, and then on your own, try to start establishing some connections so that you can understand different genres and also understand what might make them good so that you can subvert them or even take inspiration from some given genre and bring it on to another one so that you can maybe increase the performance depending on your goals. So now let's get on to the video production stage. This is basically how do you get from all these different audiovisual materials and make a video that you can give to someone or show to someone. And the steps would be pre-production, editing, post-production, and publishing. In terms of pre-production, it's as I said already, it's very important to think about your audience. So identify the audience, research them, and interact with them both before you start producing something and during and then after, so that you can get like a sense of what they need, what they want, what they're interested in, how they want to consume information, and also at the end get some feedback and engagement with them. It's also important to develop a script. So I encourage you to learn about what it means to create a script. Even documentaries and interviews have scripts. Like you might think, oh, I'm just like documenting reality. Why do I need a script? But there's different types of ways of scripting where it's useful for any type of film that you want to develop. Storyboarding is also a critical skill, and I highly encourage you to learn about it. So the idea of storyboarding is basically a draft, but it's more of a visual draft of your video where you put together drafts of each of the frames and how they relate to each other so that you have a sense of how your video will be produced and filmed and then edited. And my recommendation is for those of you who are not familiar with it, is this short beginner's course for scientific animation. And when you get the slides, you'll be able to just access this link and get through to the tutorial. And then finally, planning for gathering of materials. So this includes scheduling for filming, for interviewing, filming itself, creating animations, obtaining B-roll, which refers to supplementary video materials, like something that's not exactly your core material. And then getting the needed software, learning how to use the needed software, etc. So just a few tips in terms of gathering materials. I want to bring to your attention two terms, Creative Commons and public domain, where the first one refers to a type of licensing that, unlike copyright, it allows you more flexibility to in order to use things that someone else has created. And then public domain is basically whatever it is, the photo, the video, the audio that you're looking at, it belongs to everyone and you can do whatever you want with it. So using these terms to search for media, unless you are actually producing the media yourself, are very useful to find things to create your video. So in terms of music, I want to point you to this resource, Free Music Archive, where you can search for music files based on genre and other different properties. And so this is very nice to access when you're not producing the music for your video yourself. So in terms of editing, this is the core topic of today. And we're gonna basically, once I'm done with this intro, we're gonna launch into a hands-on activity where we're going to actually get into editing ourselves. But let's start just by kind of like coming together and agreeing on a common language for what editing means for today. And so editing is the arrangement of audio and visual information over time, where time is the duration of your video, to impact a viewer. And the impact meaning to transfer knowledge, elicit an emotion, generate a response, etc. And so what we mean by audio information, that would be narration, sound effects, music. And when we talk about visual information, then that's the video footage. And like I said earlier, it can be the main footage of like what you're recording, but also complementary things like the environment around the setting that you're filming, or if you're interviewing a scientist, then complementary footage would be them like pipetting or something. Animations, stills and graphics, which would be like drawings, photographs, graphs that complement what you're trying to convey, and text so that you can verbally, in addition to the narration, present information. And so, with all that said, then another way of framing the definition of editing would be that it's an arrangement of information on each frame of your video and its flow or change over time. So as an example of that, I took some frames from a YouTube video on quantum tunneling. And you can see here that it starts with some frames where you show a logo and then like some wording that maybe is like the company name or something like that. That transferred over then to a set of frames in which someone is speaking at the camera. And then that then transitions into an animation where some things remain the same, but then some things change and move across the screen through the frames of your video. Then that changes over now to, again, the speaker talking at the screen, but she actually talks for a little bit. And within that period of time, things do change between frames in where like there's text added to the screen, or then there's like a cut to a zoomed in version of the video. And then you change over to a next set of frames where you have an animation. And even within that, then you have changes where you maybe add some text to the screen to explain parts of the animation, etc. So with that, let's go ahead into a little bit of an exercise to analyze some video examples. So if your last name ends with A through M. And by the way, go to the Padlet if you want to have easy access to these links. But so if your last name ends with A through M, go ahead and visit these two links. And N through Z, go ahead and visit these two links. And what we're going to do is we're going to watch the first 40 seconds of the two videos that were assigned to your last name, but we're going to watch them on mute. And this is because even though I said that audio is very important, this exercise is really just to focus you on the visual aspect of frame changes and sort of like the time, the dynamics that happen through the frames without really focusing much on the information. And so while watching, just keep an eye out for different aspects of editing as we just defined them in these previous examples. And make a note of one difference and one similarity between the two videos. And then one thing you liked and one thing you didn't like, just generally, like not for each video or anything, just in general. And so go ahead and do this now. And when we're back, we're going to share with the room. So, there's in the Padlet, you're going to see 3 notes where you can add this information in the comments. But I'm also going to invite anyone that's interested in telling us by unmuting yourself a little bit about your experience with these videos. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so things are gonna start showing up soon because unless you got some annoying YouTube ads, you should probably now be ending the second video. And I see that someone has already started posting. So yeah, start posting once you're done. There's no need to really watch the second video all the way through the end if you haven't been able to do so. And I see that someone already said that both of them use animation. So one of them also uses a live action presenter. Let's see if there are any other similarities, differences, or things you liked or didn't like that show up here. I guess I'm going to transition here to this. So yeah, basically what I shared with you for APS 1 and 2, I was sharing with you some sort of like animation narrative explanatory films on quantum physics. And APS 3 and 4 were watching expert films where like you had an expert. One of them was an interview without the interviewer. And the second one was an interview with the interviewer sort of like put into the film. Let's see if anything else has shown up here. Right, so one of them assumes more starting knowledge than the other in terms of APS 1 and 2. APS 2 is more friendly, the voice is exciting, the person invites you to participate. Both had animation, but the second one seemed more engaging. So yeah, the second one here, basically one of the main differences that I note between these two is how dynamic one of them is, where this one, basically you just watched this little electron go around the atom. And in this one, you like for most of the video, I think. And then for this one, you had the speaker. She then transitioned over to an animation. She came back. There were like Zoom. There was like text on the screen and stuff like that. Let's see if we can get a few comments about APS 3 and 4. So APS 3 has more cuts than APS 4. That is very correct. Good thing to notice. It also, because one of them has 2 characters involved, it has cuts between 2 people. This one was just like they implemented some cuts, but they were just different perspectives of the same person. And that's an editing technique that's very useful to have when you are not showing more than just one person. You can have two angles and then shift between them, because just having a little bit of dynamicism in your video allows for the audience not to get too bored. All right, so for the sake of time, thanks for your comments here. I'm going to check them out. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check all of these out later, and I'm going to populate a slide here before, and then update the link that's for the slides, so that we have sort of a community-based, like what worked, what didn't work, what we like, what we didn't like. But yeah, let's move on to just wrapping up real quick this part, and then go into the hands-on tutorial. So the third step would be post-production, where we would do color correction and grading, which would entail just changing the temperature level of your image so that you achieve a tone, because color is very important in creating an emotion or like a reaction, and even just showing the quality of a video. So this is an important aspect. Audio mixing, which would be to correct background noise, adjust the audio levels of different tracks, like soundtrack versus voice, and then special effects, which would entail both visual and audio special effects. And so generally in the professional world, post-production activities are split in terms of like who is doing them, are split compared to the editing. So an editor does the editing part, a post-production person, even like you split these roles between people. But I know that like here in our more like independent, grassroots kind of activities, these types of tasks might blend with each other. And so I do encourage you to look into these three things, and like if they resonate with you, learn a little bit more about them, because they will be useful tools in your toolkit. And finally, we have the publishing part. So the one thing that I'm going to tell you today is just that different platforms have different purposes, different types of videos that are common in them, different audiences, different usage habits, different reach. And so it's just important before you produce something and after you produce something to be really familiar and get acquainted with those properties of each of the platforms so that you can use it to the best of your advantage. And here, just can check out afterwards with the slides a little bit of insight into a specific example of how YouTube works. But with that, I do want to take a break just real quick before we go into the tutorial, which hopefully we can start soon. So I was planning for a 5-minute break, but I'm hoping that everyone's okay with just like a 1 or 2 minute break, just to stretch your legs, because we're going to launch then into almost an hour and 20 minutes of working on DaVinci. So yeah, take a little break and then we'll be back. Maybe I'll do a minute. And while you're all doing that, I can check the Padlet, see if any questions have come up. So feel free to just start adding questions at this point, if anything. Sorry about that for whoever asked this question. We didn't address it earlier. It's the Resolve. It's not the Studio. I wasn't expecting you to pay anything for this tutorial. So the DaVinci Resolve Studio has a much more robust set of tools that you can use. But for video editing, really the free version is super strong. It's used by professionals even. So yeah, you can look into the paid version, but you don't need it. Okay, good to know for future events about the Padlet boxes shifting. Have you taught a course where students created a short narrative films as a final project exam? I did this in, yeah, I haven't taught that, but I would love to actually. That would be like my dream class to teach, or one of them. And I actually can share with you, if you're interested, this physics specific course. There's a paper that specifically tells you the syllabus for a physics specific video production course. So if anyone is interested in that, I can send you that link. You can just reach out by email to me. Okay, it's been more than a minute. I got distracted with the questions, but let's go ahead and get started with the tutorial part. So before I launch into it, I want to tell you a few things. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to kind of role play a little bit. So we're going to pretend that we received footage of interviews with physicists from our client, and they gave us the task to assemble a short, fun, dynamic narrative video as answering the question, do physicists see physics in their everyday life? So just to let you know, the entire tutorial, everything that we're going to do today, but also some bonus content is on the shared slides. That's why it's 197 slides, because all the steps are there. So, I understand that people have different learning ways in which they learn, or like preferences. And so there are different ways in which maybe you would want to do this. You could just watch me today and take notes. And because the slides are there for you to repeat all the steps, then you can just go back on your own and do everything. If you have two screens, then I would recommend just to press or just like move my shared Zoom screen to one of those, and then your DaVinci window to the other one, so that you can like sort of see what I'm doing, and then at the same time or almost simultaneously replicate what I've done. But if you don't, then the idea would be for you to watch what I'm doing and then try to replicate it on DaVinci. So in case you're not familiar with this, you can hit escape when someone is sharing your screen, and that removes the full screen in Zoom, and you can like transfer over between windows. And so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to open up DaVinci as our first step. So let's go ahead and open DaVinci Resolve. And I'm just getting the splash screen here. And the first thing we're going to see in DaVinci is this window. This is your projects window. And because I have not created any projects before, there's nothing here, but this would be populated as a grid with all the projects that you have. DaVinci allows you to just double click on an untitled project that it has created for you, but it also allows you to create a new project. And that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and click on new project. And then it asks you to give it a name. Of course, you want to pick a name that allows you to identify it easily. It could be untitled if you want to, but for me, it would be easier if I call it APS 2021 Workshop. So I'm going to give it that name and then create. Once that happens, then DaVinci launches us into its interface. And what I want to kind of like convey to you is that DaVinci is organized by pages. So below down at the bottom, you will see that there's these little tabs. DaVinci works by splitting the functionality of the things that you're doing into these pages. And I'm not going to go over them all today. That's up for you to explore later. The slides do contain a little bit of a description of them, but today we're just going to focus on the edit page. So go ahead and click on the edit page, and it shows then this kind of like maybe complex interface. But before we do that, we're going to go down to the bottom right and click on the gear icon to open our project settings. And there are two main things that I want you to notice here: the timeline resolution and the timeline frame rate. Our resolution is currently at 1920 by 1080 HD. So you as a consumer of videos might be familiar with the term 1080p. Let's quickly just go over what resolution means. So resolution just refers to the number of pixels that are, and when you're talking about a unit like 720p or 1080p, that refers to the number of pixels that are that populate the vertical axis of your video. And then given, depending on the aspect ratio that your video has, then the equivalent number of pixels that fill the other axis. And so you can imagine that the resolution then affects the quality of your video, because depending on the number of pixels that you have, that allows you to represent a given image, a given piece of visual information with a different type of quality. If you have more pixels, you're able to have more detail. If you have fewer pixels, the pixels will either have to be larger, so you have a really blocky figure, or they have to be smoothed out, so you have a blurry figure. And again, we can have different resolutions. So you might be familiar with the terms 1080p, 720p, 480p, and 4K. And these just refer to the number of pixels that are on the vertical axis for these three. And then 4K actually flips it around, and it's talking about the number of pixels that are present in the horizontal axis. So the consequence of this would be that, let's say that we have a image that starts at 720p. That means that we collected the information at that resolution. We had a camera that collected information at 720 pixels. And so if we enlarge that image to a size of 1080p, the pixels will either have to become bigger or blur with each other, so we lose quality in our image. However, if we shrink that image, then we're just compressing pixels, and so we don't lose the quality of that image. In practical terms, then, this means that when we increase our resolution, we go up in image quality, but also we have to think about file size. So our file size will be higher with higher quality and lower with lower quality. So depending on what we want to achieve, if we don't think that our video will be consumed in a really large screen, then we might want to have a lower resolution, because then our file size is smaller and we are able to share it with people more easily, or upload it more easily, download it more easily, etc. Then we talk about, let's talk about the frame rate. And this is the reason that I included this, is because that was the first joke in my abstract that I presented for the seminar. But frame rate is basically the frames per unit of time in your video. So as an example of that, if we have a video that's at 6 frames per second, then you have 6 frames that flip between each other in that 1 second. While if we have a video that's of 11 frames per second, then you will have 11 frames within that second, that kind of like transition between each other. So a consequence of that is that, for example, if we have a lower frame rate, our eye is able to sort of like even identify the different frames that are transitioning between each other over time. So we see that the animation here is a little bit blockier because our eye can actually see the frames. And when we go higher in frame rate, then our eye cannot detect those differences, so the animation looks smoother. The most common frame rates that we're going to encounter are 24 FPS, so frames per second, 30 FPS, and 60 FPS. For today, the difference between 24 and 30 are irrelevant for us, but look into that if you're interested in getting deeper into this FPS idea. And these two generally tend to give you a feel of cinematic, kind of like movie type feel, because historically films have been recorded at this frame rate. So culturally, we are now accustomed to see something at 24 frames per second, and kind of like say, this looks cinematic, this is like a nice looking movie or something like that. These frame rates are good for people, for like showing regular activities, so like interviews and things like that. So when we move up to 60 frames per second, this would be smoother than 24, just like I showed in that animation before this slide. And they tend to give you a feeling of a soap opera effect. So if you've heard of the soap opera effect, it's the consequence the reason that this is because soap operas were filmed at 60 frames per second, unlike movies. So whenever you have a movie and you manipulate it to look like 60 frames per second, which is something that some TVs do, then you kind of feel like it looks a little bit weird, like too realistic or plasticky. It has a soap opera effect, and that's because you have changed the frame rate from its original 24 to 60. But 60 frames per second, that can be useful for things like action, so like things that are like someone like running or something like that, and also animations like I showed you in the previous slide. We can also go beyond 60 frames per second, and this becomes important in science. So as science communicators, we should be aware of higher frame rates, because scientists record things at high frame rates. I mean, some scientists are interested in phenomena that happen really quickly, and they have developed tools to record these things at a really high frame rate. The consequence of this is that as science communicators, we can take advantage of it to show more visual information, because something that is recorded at a high frame rate has a higher density of information within that given second, just like this example shows, where at 2 frames per second, you just have, let's say, a molecule that is up and then it's down. However, if you take it at a higher frames per second, you have the information of how that molecule went down. And when you want to slow things down to show people something at a really high level of resolution, then what you do is you expand your time frame that still will contain the information that you originally had. And so when you have a lower frame rate, and then you basically fill in the blanks, right? So when you have a lower frame rate, you would just see something that's up. It's there for like 2 seconds and then it goes down. But if you have a higher frame rate, then that thing, you see all the different transitions that occur because there's more visual information within that time. So for now, for today, we are going to keep our resolution at 1080p and our frame rate for now, we're going to keep it at 24, but something's going to happen in a second that I'm going to show you. And the only setting that we want to take a look at here is let's go to within the settings, let's go to image scaling. And in there, find input scaling. And there's going to be just one option, mismatch resolution files, change it from scale entire image to fit, and make it center crop with no resizing. So this goes back to what I told you about resolution. If you ask DaVinci to scale your image to fit, regardless of what resolution you created your content with, it's going to change it to 1080p because that's our timeline resolution that we will be using. However, we don't want that. We want DaVinci to respect the original resolution of our files, and then we can change it if we want to. So this is a little bit of a weird setting that DaVinci has. Other video editors don't tend to do this, but we have to change it to center crop with no resizing. And once we do that, that's all we are concerned about with the settings. The rest of the settings are important, but they're not relevant for today's tutorial. So as you continue into your editing career or as a hobby, then you will encounter some of these. Let's go ahead and save once we change that setting and launch into DaVinci. So the first thing we're going to do to get started with our task of putting together the video is to find the files that you downloaded ahead of the event. Hopefully you downloaded those. If not, you can go to the Padlet and start downloading and maybe try to catch up, but hopefully you all did that. And locate those in your computer. So you should have downloaded a bunch of files and place them somewhere in your computer, maybe your downloads folder. When you find them, go ahead and select all of them and click on that selection and drag it into DaVinci. So click and drag, which my computer isn't doing right now. So select all your files and click them and drag them into DaVinci, and then drop them into this little vertical section that says currently no clips in media pool. If for some reason you don't see that no clips in media pool thing, you should be able to see it. But if you don't, you can go up here to the top of DaVinci and click on this icon that says media pool, and that will open this section. What DaVinci will do is when you added your files, it will likely ask you change project frame rate. And this is because our videos were recorded at 30 frames per second, but our timeline was set at a resolution or a frame rate of 24. We also, just like we did with our resolution, we want DaVinci to respect the frame rate of our original videos instead of changing it to 24. So we want to say change. So click on change. And at that point, you should have in your media pool these thumbnails that will show you what your media, the media that you imported are. You might be seeing these in a different zoom level, and you can control that by using this little bar here that's on top of the media pool. And so like you can drag and click and drag that so that like it changes the zoom level and you can see more thumbnails or fewer thumbnails. I like this setting here just because it allows me to see the names of the files. If I zoom out, you see that I see more thumbnails, but the names now have 3 dots and ellipses there. So I zoom in just enough so that I can see the names of my files because we will be referring to the name files to import different things. Something to be aware of is once we have imported these files here, then they're shown in these thumbnails. DaVinci is not creating new copies of these and then like putting them in here. It's accessing the original source file that you have in your computer to present to you a visual representation of how you can interact with that file. And so it's important to keep in mind that if you delete the file, if you rename the file, or if you move the file to another folder in your computer, DaVinci will be confused and it will show you, instead of this, it will show you a warning that says we cannot find the file, try to find it again in your computer, because otherwise it won't be able to like show you what it is and like for you to manipulate it. So keep that in mind, because this is something that all video editing software does. It only maps to the files that you have somewhere in your computer. And some settings can change that, but like for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to assume that that's the case. So now let's see that how, if I hover over these media files here, I will be able to scrub through it. So like if I hover over it and move my mouse, it will sort of like scrub through it and show me what that file contains, what that video is in this little corner here. This is what is called a viewer panel. And it shows me this one, the one on the left shows me the content of my media pool. But you notice that if I hover, it'll show me. But if I hover out, it'll stop showing me what's there. If I double click, if I want to make that permanent, I can double click on whichever of my media files I want to take a look at. And then at that point, it will be permanently stuck here into the viewer panel. And at that point, I can use these controls to sort of observe it, analyze it, and see what I'm working with. I can go all the way to the first frame. I can play it in reverse, which is kind of creepy in some cases. I can stop it. I can play it in the normal moving forward in time. I can go all the way to the last frame. And then I have these two options here called mark in and mark out, which I'm not going to talk about today. They're not going to be relevant for us. But just keep these in mind, mark in and mark out, because as you continue into your editing endeavors, mark in and mark out will be very useful. So you will encounter these in the future. So, I can basically just double click on different files and see what I'm working with, right? I can just play them and see the content itself. But for the purposes of this tutorial, then I'm going to guide you through, like, we already know what's going to be the next step after like having seen what we're working with. And so we're going to take this Tonatiuh clip and we're going to start our editing process with it. We're going to click on the thumbnail and hold, and then we're going to drag that video. We're going to drag that media down here to the lower right section that was blank. And we're going to drop that file in here but I want to drop it at the beginning of the video. So I'm going to, instead of just letting go right away, I'm going to move it so that the file or that this blue little line, and in your zoom level, it might be bigger. It's sort of touching the left side of the video, so that basically I'm dropping it, but I'm dropping it at 0, 0, 0, 0, as you can see here in this part that shows me the time that has elapsed. So I'm getting a little bit distracted with the video meeting control, so I'm just gonna hide those real quick. Sec. Okay, that's better. So that didn't work for me because my video's controls were like messing things up. But yeah, so if I click on the Tonatiuh clip and hold it and then drag it out into my timeline, I can change it and make it so that like I can move it horizontally, but I want to move it horizontally so that it's touching this left edge, and then I'm gonna let go. And at that point, I have now established my first clip that's inside of my timeline. So we're gonna talk about the timeline now. So the first thing, though, to notice is that once I drop that here into my timeline, it created, now my second viewer panel that's on the right now shows something to me. So the second viewer, the viewer on the right, will show me what is contained in my timeline. So you can see that, if I'll explain this in a second, if I move around my timeline, it actually shows me that video, the changes in that video. You will also notice that it doesn't look the same as the one on the left, which is my raw material, because my raw material is at 720p. And my timeline, we told it in our settings that we wanted it to be 1080p resolution. It's a larger resolution that we are not dropping something of a lower resolution into. So and we told it to respect that. We changed the setting and we said, don't change the resolution, keep the original resolution. So that means that my video is 720p contained within a total of 1080p. And that means that it's going to have a black border around it. And we're going to use that to our advantage in a little bit. So now that my video is here, then I can use the same type of controls as we did in our other viewer to kind of like see what we have. So I can play it. And when I was playing, you might have noticed, or when you were playing on your screen, you might have noticed that there's this vertical orange line that was moving from left to right as we were playing the video. This represents my playhead, and basically it tells me what specific frame I'm at any given point in my video. So if I move this, then I'm going to be at a different frame, and my video, my preview viewer here is going to show me a different frame. So it shows me exactly what frame I'm at any given point. There are different ways to move your playhead. So one of them is just to play using the play button in your viewer. Another one, which is a really important keyboard shortcut that we should all be aware of, is the space bar in your keyboard. If you hit the space bar once, then your video will play. And if you hit the space bar again, it will stop. This is super useful. You're going to become best friends with the space bar because it allows you to quickly, instead of going all the way to your viewer and hitting play and stop, to quickly start and stop your video when you're trying to find specific parts of it. The other way in which we can move our playhead is by clicking it, holding, and dragging it across. So that allows us to do more like lower resolution, more like rough movement between our timeline, because I can easily click it and then move all the way to the end of my clip, right? This is also very useful when you're trying to just navigate your timeline and find specific spots that you want to be that you want to be working on. So we have here this little ruler looking thing, right, that I referred to earlier. This is just basically the time units of my timeline. And so right now in the zoom level that I'm at, it's showing me the largest tick marks at 54 seconds. So it's going 54, 1 minute, 48 seconds, 2 minutes, 42 seconds, etc. And this is just a way for us to know where we are in time, depending on the video that we have. Something that I want to show you here then is that when and then this little this part here shows you the time that your playhead is standing on, right? So if I move it, that time will change. Something to note here is that this number here represents the seconds, and this number here is something smaller, right? So what is that number? And to illustrate that, I'm just going to move my playhead slowly and see what we observe. So it's right now it's at 6, and it's going to keep going up as I move my playhead. And once we get to 29 and I move it once, it goes down to 0, and then my seconds change to 3. It was at 2, and now it's 3. So that illustrates to us that our smallest unit of time that we're working with is our frames, right? Because as I told you, our videos were recorded at 30 frames per second, and we imported them, and we told DaVinci to change our timeline frame rate to match our video. So it made the timeline frame rate 30 frames per second, which means that once we get to 30, it'll now start the new second. So now let's take a look at zooming, right? So like I told you that I'm at a given zoom level, and that's what, that's the units that it's showing me. In order to zoom, you can access these 3 tools, the full extent zoom. What full extent zooms, so if you press it, it'll go to full extent zoom. If you press it, it'll show you everything that's in your timeline from 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, all the way to the end of whatever is your rightmost clip in the timeline. So right now, I only have 1 clip, and it's Sonatius, so it'll show me that is sort of like my rightmost edge. You can do detailed zoom, which will just zoom in a little bit further, and that allows you to do more like high resolution level of manipulations. We're not going to even think about detail zoom today, but you can explore it if you want to. We're going to use mainly full extent zoom and custom zoom. So for custom zoom, if you click it, then you can change the level of zoom that you have using the minus and plus icons here, or just clicking and dragging this little circle across the bar so that you zoom in or you zoom out. And of course, like as you can tell, when I'm zooming in, then my time resolution is showing higher, right? So like now it's showing me my tick marks are look larger. Something to note with this custom zoom is that it will use your time, it will use your playhead as a central point to zoom in. So it's a guide that it uses, and it centers your playhead every time you zoom in or out. So this is very useful because if I want to zoom in into like a very specific part of my video, then I will just take my playhead to that region and start zooming in or zooming out. And you see that the playhead always stays in the middle because it's basically using my playhead as the central point to create the new zoom level. So that's very useful and important to keep in mind. While I'm zoomed in, I want to use this as an opportunity. So I'm going to zoom in all the way. And I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show you another keyboard shortcut that's super important, which is the right and left keyboard arrows. So now that I'm zoomed in, I'm going to press my left keyboard arrow, and you see that my playhead is moving every time I press it once. So keyboard arrows in DaVinci and other editing software allow you to change the position of your playhead by 1 unit of time. And here our lowest unit of time is the frame, right? So it allows me to move my playhead frame by frame, which right now, maybe to some of you who are not familiar with editing, seems like, wow, that's like such a small unit of time. But a single frame makes a big difference when you're editing. So it's important to familiarize yourself with being able to change across time in a frame by frame way. And you do that by pressing left and right arrows of your keyboard. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out all the way by just clicking on the full extent zoom. And we basically have created a video at this point. If the purpose of our video was to just have Tonatiuh say something, so Tonatiuh is the interviewee, we have a video. We could easily export this little clip, and it would create a new file that has him say whatever it is that he's saying in the video, and we would be done. So at this point, I want to bring to the attention the idea of saving, right? So DaVinci has a feature where it saves every 1 second automatically. That's the default. And so there's low chances that you will lose your video or the progress that you've made in your video that you're editing. But I do still recommend you to be aware of saving, and like some software will not have that type of option. So saving is important. You don't want to be, like 2 hours into your video and not have remembered that you should have saved, and then lose that because sometimes video editing software crashes. And so Command or Control S is also a really important keyboard shortcut that many editors just kind of like by reflex learn to do over and over as they kind of like do steps. So now let's get going into the actual editing, because we don't just want Tonatiuh's clip and export it as our final video. And what we're going to do is we're going to so hopefully everyone has the Tonatiuh clip here. If you didn't do that, there's still time to catch up, because all you have to do is click and drag the Tonatiuh clip into the timeline. So I'm going to delete it. I'm going to do that again. Click the clip in your media pool, hold it, drag into the timeline, and place it so that it's at the left edge of the timeline, and let it go. Actually, that didn't necessarily work because I was too zoomed out. So if your clip is not at the leftmost edge of the timeline, you can click on the clip while it's on the timeline, hold, and then drag it horizontally so that you can move it left, and it will then sort of snap into the left edge, the left limit of your soundtrack, or of your timeline, sorry. So once we have it there, we're gonna start editing. This clip basically is Tonatiuh answering the question do physicists see physics every day? Do you have any anecdotes about this? So he first reacts to the clip. Let me play you to the question. Let me play that to you. And by the way, I just realized that maybe I'm not sharing my audio. So at this point, sharing audio will be important. So I'm gonna just the easiest way. I'm gonna stop sharing and then share again. Can I get a confirmation that you can hear this when I play it?
Oof, yeah, sometimes as a physicist, you really cannot.
Yes, we can hear it.
Thank you. So he first answers the question literally. We said, do physicists see physics every day? So he now answers.
Oof, yeah, sometimes as a physicist, you really cannot help yourself. And
so he says, yes, sometimes as a physicist, you can really not help yourself. And then he launches into an anecdote. So we asked for an anecdote, so he tells us an anecdote.
So this is a funny anecdote. Actually, this was not.
So this is a funny anecdote, and then he talks about the anecdote for like quite a good amount of time. But during the interview, actually, he gave us 2 anecdotes. So he gave us 2 for the price of 1. And he finished. So he first told us a personal anecdote, and then he told us a historical anecdote. So talking about a historical figure in physics who, like how he saw physics in his everyday life or something like that, which should start around here.
There's another anecdote, a very similar anecdote.
So then he says, there's another anecdote, right? So we have here 3 different kind of like thematic things in our video. One is the literal answer to our question. One is anecdote 1, and one is anecdote 2, right? And we want to, we were asked for a dynamic, quick, fun video. We don't want Tonatiuh to be just giving 2 anecdotes. We actually just want to isolate one of them and use that for our video. So we're going to now learn 2 ways in which we can achieve that. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the first part, the literal answer to the question. The way we're going to do that is we're going to take our playhead to the beginning of anecdote number 1. So how would we do that? We would basically click and drag on our playhead. And because we have sort of like analyzed the video and like know a little bit about where things start and end, we can just click and drag it to approximately where we think the first anecdote starts, which should be around here. And then we confirm that that's the case by playing it, by hitting our spacebar to play it.
So this is a funny.
Okay, so indeed, yes, this is where he says this is funny anecdote. So we're going to go ahead and place our playhead at that specific point. And so if you still have not built the skills and kind of like the finesse to do this, you can just place your playhead, click and drag your playhead to second 10 and frame 08, and that should take you to where we want to be. And once we have our playhead there, then we're going to get rid of this little piece where he just answers, yes, physicists cannot help ourselves. We're going to do that by hovering over the edge of our clip, as I'm doing here. And you can see that my arrow turns into a different icon. This icon represents the trimming tool. And what this allows me to do is I'm going to illustrate it now. Feel free to do it at the same time or just after I do it. I can click and hold and then drag my clip to the right. And you see that it starts sort of chewing away on what the clip contains. And we're going to go ahead and do that. So find the trimming tool, click, hold, and drag it to the right until it sort of reaches the playhead. And you might notice a little bit that it's sort of like it wants to go there. It wants to snap to our playhead. When it's there, we're just going to let it go. And we have now made our first editing thing, right? We have deleted this little part where Tonatiuh is right before he speaks about his anecdote. This happened here very specifically in that way because we have a feature activated called snapping. And so snapping is this feature that DaVinci and other editing software has that allows, that makes it so that different actions that you take will snap to different parts of your timeline. So for example, things will snap to your playhead, things will snap to the edges of your clips. And in this case, our trimming action snapped into our playhead. So that allows us to do very high resolution precise things without us having to like really, with our mouse, be really precise. So now that we've gotten rid of our first little intro part, we want to get rid of either of these two anecdotes because we just want to use one. So we're going to use our second technique for cutting, which is the blade tool. For now, I'm just going to illustrate to you the blade tool. So you can just look at my screen. And the blade tool is found here. It's really easy to find because it looks like a blade icon. And when I click it, I activate the blade tool. And I could go across my clip and I can make cuts on it. So if I have my arrow tool, so this is my selection mode active, I can click on my clip and you see that it creates this orange border around it because my clip has been selected. It's now active. But now let me go to with my blade tool and create some cuts. I'm just going to create some random cuts. And you notice that when I create the cuts, then these vertical dashed lines appear on my clip. And when I use my selection tool, instead of selecting the entire clip, now when I click on it, it depends on where I click and it will select specific subsections of it because I have created a cut. Now basically I have created this number of clips. They are now independent from each other. And of course, if I were to play this, they would show me a fluid flow of the video because they originate from something that was fluid. But I could just change the order of them and create this like crazy surreal thing that has no sense of chronological order by changing the arrangement of these clips because they are now independent from each other. What this means is that now I can click and hold and drag these horizontally, and I will be able to manipulate them independently from each other. As you can see here, I'm sort of like moving them away from each other. And when I click on one of them and I hit my delete key on my keyboard, I'm able to just delete them, right? So delete them individually. If I had not created a cut, so now I'm using Command or Control Z to undo my steps. If I had not created a cut and I clicked and deleted, then my entire clip would be gone. However, let me just undo that or redo that, sorry, or undo. However, if I create these cuts with my blade tool, then I can independently delete different parts of that clip. And that's what we're going to do to get rid of the anecdote that we don't want to be present in our video. So let me undo all of this. And now at this point, you can stop just watching and now you can recreate the steps, follow along if you're trying to follow along the tutorial today. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a cut. Actually, let me just go back a little bit because I want us to be exactly in the same place. So yeah, so we now have the Tonatu clip and we have a little bit of a blank space here from when we got rid of the intro part. And that should happen at 10 seconds, 8 frames. So we're going to create a cut between the part where he stops his first anecdote and when he starts his second anecdote. And how do we do that? Similar to how we found where the first anecdote started. We sort of have a general sense that his first anecdote was a given length. So we click and drag our timeline or our playhead in our timeline to the general point where we think that our second anecdote will start. And something that I just did here that allowed me to really identify it, like I'm pretty sure it's here. Let me confirm that with you.
There's another anecdote.
Right. So you notice that I maybe uncannily was able to find it really easily. That's because when you become more acquainted with editing, you start using the audio, which as you can see here, the audio will show me a waveform. And you start kind of like using the waveform as different fingerprints of what your video is doing. So if I zoom in a little bit here into where the second anecdote starts, not that zoomed in, you can see that where the second anecdote starts, there's this like signature that I can basically just kind of recognize. It's sort of like you learn to read the waveform and you recognize this as, oh, that's where the second anecdote starts. However, like when you're starting, the best way to do something like this is just to like watch the whole video first, start like kind of like getting a mental map of where you think things begin and start, and then use the RAW kind of like bringing the playhead to general places that you think something is happening, pressing the space bar to play the video.
And you just keep going. There's another anecdote.
And then recognizing, okay, and then you start zooming into the part where you want. So this is where he said there's a second anecdote. And I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to use my left and right arrows. Like we explained earlier, they allow me to move frame by frame. So now I know this approximately around where the second anecdote starts. I'm going to move with my left and right arrows to kind of like find that place where like he actually starts saying that sentence.
There's another anecdote.
Okay, and I can confirm there's another anecdote indeed happens here. So now I move my playhead here. And basically, if you are following, but you're still not very comfortable with like doing those manipulations, but your video is placed where like we placed everything originally, you could go to minute 1, second 47, and frame 20, and that's where we're going to make our cut. So I'm going to just double check and confirm that that's indeed the case.
There's another anecdote.
Okay, so let me move to what I told you, 147.20. 147.20. And so I'm going to create a cut here. And so the way that I create a cut is just like I showed you before. I'm going to go to my my blade edit mode by clicking on the blade icon. I'm going to hover over my playhead. In this case, the cuts that I showed you before were just random, right? But we have placed our playhead exactly where we want to make that cut. And so we're going to hover our blade there, and we're going to click. And that has essentially created the two new clips. The reason that we wanted our playhead there is because the blade, that action takes advantage of the snapping tool that I told you about, where it sort of snaps to where the playhead is, and we will make sure to be making a cut exactly at that frame. And if I move my playhead out of the way, then you can see indeed the vertical dash lines are there, and now I have two clips. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. You can do that by doing a full extent zoom or using the zoom out within the custom zoom. I'm going to do it with custom zoom and zoom out. And now what I want you to do is I want you to take the selection mode, click on the clip that you don't want to keep. So here is where we're going to start diverging, because you're going to have the option to use either the personal anecdote. I know that we weren't able to like look at the whole thing today, but just based on my description, try to pick the one that you think might be best to use. One of them is a personal anecdote about a story of something that happened to Tonatiuh. And the second one would be a historical figure of physics anecdote. And so go ahead and click on the one you don't want to keep and hit delete on your keyboard. And that should delete the clip that you don't want to keep. So the reason that I picked number 2, and the reason that I picked it is because it's shorter, and I'm trying to create a dynamic video. So I want something, an answer that's a little bit shorter. We could create a dynamic version of the anecdote number 1, but we would have to like make cuts within it so that it flows more quickly. And so this is a little bit quicker and easier because I know my anecdote's already shorter. And there's also this thing that he says at the end. Let me play it for you.
So we're very geeky.
So he ends his answer with, so we're very geeky. And I just thought that was a little bit of a humorous, kind of like a personal tone, kind of like thing that he said that will add to the character of my video. And so I wanted to keep anecdote 2 because of that as well. So now we have our first clip here, and we're gonna continue telling a story. But before that, I just want to illustrate. So don't do this part along with me, but I want to show you something, which is that if I hover over my clip with the and find the trimming tool, which would be if I hover over and go to the left edge of the clip, and if I click and hold my trimming tool, I could use it just like we did for the first part and get rid of more part of the video. but I can also move it the other way around. And what you will notice, actually, let me zoom out a little bit before I do that. What you will notice when I do that is that when I press and hold on my trimming tool, it will show me this gray outline that represents the original Tonatiuh clip that we added all the way at the beginning. And if I click and hold on that, and then I move my trimming tool to the left, you see that I'm starting to recover the things that I originally had removed. This goes back to this idea that I all the way at the beginning told you about, which is that DaVinci and other editing software, they're just drawing from files that exist on your computer. They're not creating a new file or anything like that. They're not creating this new thing that you cut. They're just taking from the original file and displaying to you in a visual way the different manipulations that you're doing, which means that there's nothing lost. And if you wanted to retrieve the information that you had removed, you can just do that. So the clip that you added is going to be in its entirety contained somewhere behind the scenes. And so let's say that I changed my mind and I said, well, actually, I want my video not to be dynamic and quick and snappy. I want it to be really meditative, contemplative, and I want each person to say everything they originally said. I can easily just retrieve all of Tonatiuh's anecdote, and then I'm good to go continuing with my editing. Of course, that's not what we're doing today, so I'm going to do Command or Control Z to undo that action and go back to where we were with anecdote either 1 or 2, depending on what you picked. Let's now continue building our story. And so let's go into our media pool again. Something that I meant to do before, actually, before when we went through all this process, was to tell you that you can open or close your media pool by going all the way up to the top of the DaVinci and finding the media pool tab. And when you press it, it will either turn on or off your media pool. And I understand, even for someone that's more experienced with editing, that this looks really cluttered, really like crammed. And so finding ways to open up the space in the editing software is always a nice thing to know how to do. And so if we had closed our media pool, I would have been able to show you all of these steps without that in the way, and it would have been a little bit more roomy, right? So closing the media, closing different tabs is important to know how to do, and that's how we do the media pool. But let's open the media pool and find a next clip that we want to continue telling our story with. So we're going to scroll down, and let's go ahead and find the clip called Ámbar Cortado A. So it should be the first Ámbar, 10_Ámbar clip that you see in your media pool. So Cortado A is the important part. And we're going to click and hold, and we're going to drag it into our timeline again. Notice what I'm doing here now, though, that I'm clicking, holding, and I'm dragging. And before I let it go, not only do I have freedom in terms of the horizontal axis on where I place this clip, but I can also move it up. And you see that I have freedom on the vertical axis. And when I do that, it actually creates this new thing called V2 Video 2. So let's go ahead and click and drag the Ámbar Cortado A clip, bring it into our timeline, and drop it somewhere on the timeline. But let's drop it so that it creates this new thing called V2, like I'm doing right now. And I'm gonna let go so that now the clip for Ámbar is now in my timeline. If this looks different to you right now, you should just zoom out a little bit. This is why I see both clips right now, because I have zoomed in, zoomed out. So what happened here is that when I dropped the Ámbar clip into this new thing called V2, it created a new track. So tracks are an important part to keep in mind when you are working with editing software. They are basically the way in which video editing software organizes the different things that you have in your timeline. And that has two reasons to exist. One of them is for the purposes of organizing within the editing workflow. So I could decide, let's say that my video is going to have a bunch of different Tonatiuh clips and a bunch of different Ámbar clips. I could decide that the video 2 track is only for Ámbar and video 1 is only for Tonatiuh. So that way I'm easily able to know what is where. I could have another track where I only have my subtitles, and so I know where things are. It's basically layers, right? The other important way in which tracks matter is, we're gonna see it now. So Let's go ahead and move our Amber clip. So regardless of where you put it originally, let's click and hold it and drag it horizontally so that it comes up and it's on top of the Tonatio clip. So it's still on V2, but it's going to be on top of the other one, just like I did here. And what you noticed is that when I did that, I clicked and held and dragged the video part of it, which was in V2, but this little thing down here that's green moved along with it. So not only do we have video tracks, but we also have audio tracks. And editing software will, by default, create a connection or a link between your audio and video tracks that you bring in from your media pool, because in most cases, you will want those to be synchronized with each other. There's ways to unlink them because maybe we want to get creative in different ways and make them not synchronized, or maybe delete the audio but only keep the video. And there's ways to unlink them, but for today, we're just going to keep them linked. Linking in DaVinci is represented here. You can see this little chain icon. So that tells me that this track or this clip in this track is linked to something else. I will know what it's linked to because when I click it, it will highlight not only that one, but whatever else it's linked to in this orange box around it. So what are the consequences of having things in different tracks? More not from the editing workflow perspective, but from a more pragmatic perspective. If I go over and move my playhead to where the Amber and Tonatio clips are, I'm going to play it for you now.
There's another
It's
anecdote,
really silly.
a very similar
So,
anecdote. James Clerk
yesterday I was
Maxwell.
thinking.
So you might have noticed that basically what played as my preview in the viewer was only Amber's video, but not we couldn't see Tonatio's, even though we know that it's there because it's here, like it's present in El Clip is there. However, our audio, we could hear both of them speaking. So whenever you have tracks that are overlapping with each other, in terms of audio, there will be no precedence on which one is where. Everything that's in the audio channels will be played to you at the same time. So it's not like Tonatio is on top of Amber, so I will only hear Tonatio. I will actually hear both. But in video tracks, whatever is on top of something else will take precedence in terms of what you see. So because the Amber clip is the same size, it's at the same position as Tonatio, and it does not have any properties that make it transparent or anything like that, then it's blocking Tonatio's view, and I only see Amber. And of course, this can be used in creative ways, like overlaying things with each other, putting them in different places, having transparencies and things like that, so that you play with the z-axis, basically. But right now, we don't want that, right? I mean, we want to create a linearly flowing story where Tonatio speaks and then Amber speaks. So we're going to make some changes. Let's go ahead. Actually, now I'm going to remember to close our media pool so that we have more room to play with. So let's close our media pool, and we should have, this is what things should look like for you. And let's go ahead and open our inspector. So go up all the way to the right, and you will see this thing called inspector, and you click it, and it opens the inspector panel. The inspector panel is a context-dependent panel. That means that whatever it is that you have active at the moment will change what you see here. And with our inspector panel open, let's click on the Amber clip in the timeline so that it's highlighted with the orange box. And you will notice that in the inspector panel, then we can have two tabs active, the audio or the video. So let's go into the video tab. And now you can see that the properties that are active for the Amber clip, because it's a video clip, are different things like zoom, position, rotation angle. So the inspector basically is a panel that shows you different properties for whatever it is that you have active that allows you to change those properties. And it's a very comprehensive set of things that you can do to manipulate your video in different ways. So let's go ahead and change one property for the Amber clip by going to zoom, double clicking on the right to the right of the X, there's a 1.000. Double click on that so that you can actually change the number that's in that box and change that number to 0.7 and then hit enter. And once you have done that, then you should notice that the Amber clip has gone down in size. Basically, the zoom, we reduced it, so logically, it's now down in size. Now you can see that actually, indeed, Tonatiuh still exists. He's just behind Amber, because now in your viewer panel, you should be able to see that the Amber video is on top, but the Tonatiuh clip, which we did not change its size, is behind it. So there are other properties that you can change here, and I just encourage you to play around with them. But I'll quickly just show you that, for example, you can change the position of a clip. And this could be useful, for example, if like you have interviewed, or you have recorded two people talking to each other, but with different cameras. So you import the two clips of the two people, and you can sort of like overlay them and put them next to each other by changing their zoom levels, their position level of the clip. So now like you have Amber and Tonatiuh on the screen, right? And you can play, and you can see
There's another
It's
anecdote,
really silly.
a very similar anecdote.
both videos are there, both videos are playing. So let me undo that, the position change that I made. And so all of us should be at this point right now. So of course we don't want Amber and Tonatiuh to be overlapping with each other. Like I said, we functionally want this to flow chronologically in a kind of like linear way. So for function, we don't want Amber's clip to be on top, and just for like the purpose of our video, we don't want that either. So let's go ahead and move the Amber clip, and so that would be done by clicking it and holding and dragging it, right? And we just want it to happen after Tonatiuh. And we also don't necessarily need it to be on the second track. There's no reason for that. And so we're gonna move the Amber clip towards the right, lower it down into the track 1, and then bring it down over to the left so that it is at the edge. It meets the edge of the Tonatiuh clip on the right side of Tonatiuh's clip. And you will notice that because of the snapping tool, the snapping feature, it will want to do that. It will want to just be attached to the right where the Tonatiuh clip ends. So once you get there, let it go, and then you will have Tonatiuh's clip, and it flows into Amber's clip. To illustrate the preciseness of that, I'm just gonna go here to where they meet and show you that when my playhead is at frame 248, 14, it shows me Tonatiuh, and if I press my keyboard arrow, the right keyboard arrow once, so that I'm on same frame but just 15, or the next frame over, sorry, then Amber shows up, right? So it's a immediate transition between the two, and that's what we want, right? So hopefully you're all at this place, and now I'm just going to illustrate something to you. So at this point, unless you feel starting to feel really comfortable with DaVinci and the flow, just watch me do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick fix of what happens between these two clips, because if I play them to you, you will kind of notice that there's a little bit of a silence between them. So let's play that. Let me zoom in a little bit. So let me play that for you.
So we're very geeky.
It's really silly.
So you notice that he says we're very geeky, and then he stops, he smiles, there's silence, and then we go over to Amber's clip, but also she's kind of pondering her answer before she says it's very silly. So there's a silence there, and because our client asked us to make a dynamic, snappy video, we want it to be really sharp and quick in the transitions. So I'm going to do that. Again, this is not necessary for the tutorial, so don't replicate it if you're not feeling super comfortable yet with DaVinci. The consequence of it will be more on the snappiness of the video, but everything else that we're doing after this, you'll be able to continue doing. But so I'm going to zoom in to kind of illustrate to you that even though maybe to our ears and to our eyes, that silence is not super big, it's actually a lot in terms of editing, kind of like the context of editing. Because if you see, he says geeky, and the geeky part ends here, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, I'm gonna stop counting. We have over 20 frames between the time when he says geeky or ends his geeky, and Amber says it's very silly. So that's a lot. I mean, more than 20 frames. When we're talking about the fact that one frame makes a difference, that's a lot. So I'm just going to get rid of these frames, and I'm going to quickly narrate the process of it to kind of like duplicate some of the stuff that we have done already. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to find where he says very geeky, right?
Very geeky.
So he says geeky, he ends geeky. I'm going to move with my keyboard arrows so that I find a place right after he says it, but not too tightly to where he stops saying that, maybe around here. I'm going to go to my blade tool, going to click on it, going to click on the clip to create a cut. Going to go back to my selection tool, going to select the part that's after where he is done saying geeky, and I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard, and I got rid of it. And then I'm going to do the same with Amber. I'm going to go to the beginning, going to play.
It's really.
And now I know that's exactly where she starts saying it's very silly. Then I'm going to use my playhead to go approximately to where that happens. And I'm identifying it with my waveform because I know there's sound starts here. Otherwise, it was flat. There was no sound. Then I use my right and left keyboard arrows to identify. Indeed, that's where she says it's. And then I move back a little bit because I don't want it to be like super, super sharp in terms of the transition. Go to my blade tool, create a cut, go back to my selection tool, select the part that I don't want and delete it. And at this point now I have this silence here because in our video timeline, if I were to reproduce this, there would just be this gap, right? It's a black screen with no sound. So I want to get rid of that space between them, and it would be as easy as clicking and holding and dragging Amber's clip so that it snaps again to Tonatiu's. Or there's another thing that I want you to keep in mind, which is if you click in any part of your timeline that is empty, it'll highlight it in gray, like a lighter gray. And if you hit delete on your keyboard, it'll get rid of that space. That's useful because if I were to click and drag my Amber clip, it would only move that. But if I use my click timeline and delete form of doing it, any other clips that were not Amber's clip will actually follow that. So this deleting thing actually deletes the entire. So if I have more tracks, let me zoom out. If I have more tracks, it will actually get rid of that space for the entirety of my timeline. So everything will be deleted and everything will be snapped back into place. So the differentiation between clicking and holding and dragging a clip versus deleting is important because sometimes you want to move everything and sometimes you want to move only one thing. But now let me get rid of that silence and play for you what our resulting what our product is.
We're very geeky.
It's really silly.
Right. So now he's very geeky, and then she starts. It's very silly. It's a faster transition. It's snappier. And I also kind of like how there's a little bit of like a mirroring in vowels because it's like geeky, silly. So it's a little bit of a play there that as an editor, I notice, and I think it's like a nice little element. So now that we have Amber's clip next to Tonatiu's, I also wanted to point to you to another important keyboard shortcut, which is we have been using the left and right arrows. Now we're going to use the up and down arrows of our keyboard. So go ahead and press the up or down arrows on your keyboard while you're active in the timeline. So like when you have a clip active. And you will notice that your playhead is now moving between with a rougher kind of transitions, right? That's because the upper and lower, the up and down arrows of your keyboard will move your clip between edges, or sorry, not your clip, would move your playhead between edges. So it's now moving between the rightmost edge of Amber's clip, the transition between the two, so the intersection between Amber and Tonatiuh, and then again, the edge of Tonatiuh. This is super useful because when you want to navigate your timeline in like longer distances, then pressing up and down is important. And when you want to place your playhead at specific places, like a transition between clips, then that's how you locate that, by pressing up and down. So now we have our clips, right? Like when now we have Tonatiuh, he's going to say his anecdote, and then Amber's going to go forward. We have built a story at this point. It's a simple story, but it's something, right? Or a part of a story, I guess. Let's now go back to this idea that our clips are surrounded by a black frame. And so what's going to happen here, basically, if we were to export our video, is that it's just going to show you exactly that. Technically, this black background is actually transparent, although for this tutorial, we're not going to really focus on that. It's a little bit more advanced. But if you were to export your clip now, it would just show you Amber and Tonatiuh with a black background. However, the aesthetics of our video, we were asked to be kind of consistent with the aesthetics, and the aesthetics are based on this white background with colorful shapes that appear and disappear and things like that. That's sort of like the branding of this video. So we want to change the background of our video from black to something else, and we're going to go ahead and do that. So to do that, we're going to go into our effects library. So if you go up all the way to the top, almost left, kind of left corner, you will see the effects library button. And if you click it, then you will open that panel. The effects library is a very robust set of, like the name says, effects that allows you to do video effects like transitions, audio effects like audio transitions, and it also allows you to add text to your timeline, which we're going to do in a little bit. But for now, let's go ahead and find the tab called Generators. And let's go ahead and find this thing called the solid color. So we're going to click on our solid color and hold it, and then drag that out into our timeline. And we're going to create a solid color clip in track V2. And you can place it anywhere on the timeline horizontally, as long as it's sort of like, you know, on top of the Tonatiuh or the Amber clip. And then you're going to let go, and now you have created a solid. So let me move my playhead over. Actually, we can close our effects library for now. We don't need it, so we have more space. And let me move my playhead over to where the solid is, where I place my solid. And you will notice that it shows me just this like black screen. So like Tonatiuh is there, and then Tonatiuh is not there anymore. And then Tonatiuh comes back. And this is a consequence of what we talked about before, that layers, tracks behave as layers. And because this the solid clip is on above the Tonatiuh clip, then it's going to block it. We're going to fix this in a little bit, but for now, we're going to change the color of our background to something that we want. And we're going to do that by going to the inspector panel. So again, upper right corner, you are able to open your inspector. I actually closed it at some point without telling you to do so, so you might still have it open. And right now I have my Tonatiuh clip active, but I'm going to, with the inspector open, I'm going to click and activate my solid color that I added into the timeline. And we can see that this changes what I can do. It actually allows me only to change the color of the generator. And so double clicking on that little square that should be black for everyone opens up this little panel here that allows you to change the color. You can change the color by dragging the little bar here, the little arrow on the bar, and clicking and dragging it. I'm gonna make mine white, but feel free to just move within the color wheel and make it whatever color that you want. So change the color of your solid generator, and when you're done, click OK. And now we have this white or whatever color you picked solid on the screen. But of course, we don't want it to be on top and block our interviewees, right? So let's go ahead and move that. And thinking about the way in which layers work, we just need to move it to a lower level. So we're going to do that by clicking and holding the solid color clip, moving it down to our track 1, but of course without intersecting with the Tonatiuh or the Amber clip. So I'm placing it now on the left of the Tonatiuh clip, somewhere on the left of it. And then we're going to move the Tonatiuh and the Amber clip up to V2, to track 2. And to move both at the same time, then we can click on the timeline somewhere where there are no clips and hold, and then drag, and you see that you can create a box. And when you drag that box across multiple clips, it will select them as long as they're covered by the box. You should probably know about this from other software that you've used. And once we have both selected, then we just click, hold, and drag them up to the next track. And then we can easily click, hold, and drag our solid clip horizontally so that it's underneath the Tonatiuh clip. And if I place my playhead on top of where that intersection happens, you see that now indeed I have Tonatiuh's clip, and then there's a white background. But if I go further just a little bit, then it goes back to the background. That's because the length of my solid clip will determine how long it lasts in my timeline, right? So I just need to extend this over to all the way to where amber is done. And I do that by using the trim tool. So I hover over the clip so that it goes to, it changes my arrow into the trimming tool. And some of you might be too zoomed out for this to happen. If your clip is too small relative to the zoom level, it might not activate it might not show you your trim tool. So just zoom in a little bit and you should be able to see it. And I'm just gonna, once I find that, the trim tool, I'm gonna click it, hold it, and I'm gonna drag it all the way to the right where it snaps with the ending of Amber's clip. And indeed now I have a white background for the entirety of the interview that we have filmed. So something that's going to happen in the slides, if you decide to look at the slides later, this tutorial, the slide version, is that after this, I'm going to show you some extra steps that are not happening today, where we add some text to the video here, and we animate that text. So if you're interested in adding text and animations, check out this this part that follows the Amber Tonatiuh and adding a solid color. But for now, we're going to continue building our story, building our video. So we're going to close the inspector just to get a little bit more space. We're going to open our media pool. And we're going to find a clip called intro.mp4. Let's go ahead and zoom out so that we really see the entirety of our timeline. So that the Tonatiuh clip, and then also are able to see the 000, all the way to the left edge of our timeline. And let's click and actually, let's not do that. We're going to import our intro clip, but we're going to do it differently than we have done for these two. We're going to double click on our intro clip. So again, it becomes permanently attached to our left viewer panel. And when we hover over it, we notice that these little icons appear on the screen. One of them is like a film strip, and then the other one is a waveform. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to import into our timeline only the video or only the audio of a media file. So if we import from here by clicking and dragging on the thumbnail, it imports both, as we have seen. But for the intro, because we don't really have any sound in it, we don't want to import the muted audio that it has, because it would like interfere with some of the things we're going to do. We just want the video. So we're going to click and hold on that film strip icon and then drag that into our timeline. And we're going to place it into our, V1. And you can place it horizontally anywhere that you want, as long as it's to the left of Tonatiuh. And once it's there, we're going to click and hold, and we're going to drag it all the way to the beginning of our timeline so that it sort of snaps with the leftmost edge of our timeline. And what we have done here is we have added an intro animation that I created ahead of time. So this little animation shows us just a little bit of some, an eye and some like physics related visuals and stuff like that. And so the animation itself is ready for us to use. And then we're going to continue editing a little bit. But what we want to do with the animation, which is not very informative, I guess, like if I play the animation for you, I guess we can see it, what it does. It's an eye, there's a color wheel kind of thing, then it explodes into these like wavelengths and stuff like that. It's just like visual stuff that again matches with the aesthetic that we had we had talked about like white background with colorful icons. But it doesn't say much. It's just like very aesthetically pleasing, but it doesn't say much. So we're going to add a little bit of context to continue telling our story. And we're going to do that as follows. We're going to close our media pool, and this is just to give us more room. And we're going to find a part in our intro where we want to insert some text. So let's go and place our playhead somewhere where the intro is happening. And let's zoom in, just so that we have more like high resolution control over this part of the timeline. And let's find the part of our animation where this color wheel is going to pop out from the eye. So the way that we would do this normally would be just to like scan this thing, like watch it and then like determine where that happens. But I'm just going to tell you where that is, kind of like if you want to cheat. That's going to be at second 8 and frame 16. So that's 8:16 is just the eye, and 8:17 is the color wheel starting to emerge out from the eye, right? It comes out from behind the eye and then expands and starts rotating. So let's go to frame 8:16. Actually, let's go to frame 8:17 and put our playhead there. And let's go ahead and open our inspector. Actually, no, sorry. You can leave the inspector open. We're going to use it in a little bit, but we need to add the text. And we add the text by going to our effects library. So open the effects library and go ahead and go to the tab titles. And that's the tab that allows you to add different text to your screen. We're going to find a title called Text Plus. We're going to click it, we're going to hold, and we're going to drag that out into our timeline, and we're going to place it so that it snaps, so that its left edge snaps with where we placed our playhead. And we're going to place that in V2, in track 2, so on top of our animation, and we're going to let go. And so at that point, we have inserted some text. It's not really easy to see it, but you can see here there's some letters that appeared. Let's close our effects library. We don't need it anymore. And if you didn't open the inspector when just a few seconds ago when I said that, open the inspector. And when I activate my text clip that I added, then my inspector, because it's context dependent, will change considerably. It actually now shows me this thing that says text, which allows me to change the properties of the text that I added in many different ways. We're first going to replace our custom title. That's what it says. It's just the default. It says custom title. So we're going to go into this text box. We're going to delete custom title. And we're going to write the following in caps. Do physicists, hit return, see physics, hit return, everywhere. Question mark. We did this instead of just like the sentence in one line because we want to take advantage of the entire screen that we're working with. And if we were just had a sentence, then we would only be able to enlarge it to the left and right edge of the sentence. While if we create a block, then that block can be expanded more to fit the shape of the container. And we still can't see it very well. So let's scroll down in our inspector panel, and you'll see that you can see the color. Ability to change the color. Double click on the color and change it to whatever it is that you want. I'm going to make my my text black. I'm going to hit OK, and now I can see my text better. Feel free to also change the font if you want to. I'm going to keep the font as is. And now we're going to, everyone will, all of us will change the size. So we can see here, there's the size property. We can click on this little circle and drag it to the right, and that will change the size of our text. And so we're going to just resize it up so that it fits nicely on the screen. And again, you see this is a consequence of the fact that we made it into 3 lines instead of just like one sentence, right? Or one straight line. And now we have this text here. And so the duration of that text will depend on how long this clip is. And we want it to be, basically, let me show you what's happening here right now, that the text will appear when the clip starts in our timeline, right? So if I'm moving across my timeline, the text will appear when my clip starts. and then it will last as long as my clip is long, right? If we want to change the length, so like the current length is going to be 5 seconds because that's the default. But we want it to be about like 2 seconds, 2 seconds and a half, or sorry, the half of those 5 seconds. And that's because that 5 seconds is a little bit too long. It would make our audience be there for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, reading that thing. And we expect our audience to be able to read that a little bit quicker, but also we don't want it to just flash on the screen. So let's change the length of this by right-clicking on the clip itself, the text plus clip, and going to this tool here called change clip duration. And that will allow us to change it numerically. So we can just click on here and use our keyboard to call that 2 seconds and 15 frames. Again, half of that, because we have 30 frames, would be 2 seconds and 15 frames. And we're going to change that, and then it will reduce the length of our text. I'm going to play that for you. Okay. And that's, that's basically the new text that we have added on the screen. So the slides that I am going to provide to you actually have some extra bonus material at this point, where we animate for this text to actually emulate a little bit what this wheel is doing, where it kind of comes out behind the eye. So the text will pop up out from the screen, and it'll also have a typing kind of animation. So 2 animations. So if you're interested in that, you can go into the slides and check out those, how we do that. And now our animation has this extra stuff, right? We created this animation long just to give us room to work with, but we don't really want this. We want our text to appear and then end and then like get going with our snappy dynamic video, right? So this will be as easy as using the trim tool by hovering over the right side of the right edge of our animation clip, clicking, holding, and dragging it back to the left so that it snaps with the edge of our text. And then we have an animation that only lasts as long as the text lasts. Okay. So now let's continue building our story. And we're going to do that by, let's close our inspector. We don't need it anymore. Let's open our media pool. And we're going to insert a few more clips. So let's go ahead and find Tonatiu's clip. We're going to drag and drop Tonatiu's clip into our timeline, just as we did at the beginning. That's kind of the first thing we did. And we're going to drop it into a new track. We're going to create a track 3. So as you can see, as I'm doing right now, a track 3, it can be anywhere you want horizontally. It just has to be on track 3. Somewhere near maybe where the intro is. And what we want to extract from the Tonatiuh clip this time, the very first thing that we got rid of when we started editing is the thing that we want actually for this little part that we're going to create. So let's go ahead and quickly, as an exercise, let's do a little bit of a test of the skills you hopefully have gained so far, and go ahead and trim out everything except this part.
Oof, yeah, sometimes as a physicist, you really cannot help yourself.
So we want the part where Tonatiuh says, sometimes as a physicist, you really cannot help yourself. Let's go ahead and get rid of everything except that. And if you want the bonus challenge, then also get rid of everything that he says before he starts answering the question, because he has this like nonverbal reaction where he adjusts himself and is like preparing to answer. Get rid of that too. Get rid of that and only leave the part where he actually speaks. So yes, sometimes as physicists, we cannot help ourselves is what we want. And go ahead and do that on your own. I'm going to do it myself here as well without saying anything. I'm just going to replicate that action without saying anything. So this is a little bit of a test.
Oof. Yeah, sometimes as a physicist, you really cannot help yourself.
Okay, so that's the amount of time that it took me to do this. Hopefully you all were able to do it. If not, go ahead and just trim Tonatiu's clip into a short, like
Yeah, sometimes as a physicist, you really cannot help yourself.
like a 2-3 second clip of what we inserted into the timeline. That should be good enough to continue the purposes of the technical parts of this video. And now we're going to insert a couple more clips. Let's go ahead and be near in our timeline. Let's be near to where we have the Tonatiuh clip with this like an approximate zoom level that allows you to see like the intro and the Tonatiuh clip. Let's go ahead and find the following clips. Let's go ahead and find Caterina Cortado A. So that should be the first 06_Caterina clip that you see in your media pool. And let's click and hold and drag it out into our timeline and place it somewhere in V3, somewhere to the left of the Tonatiuh clip, or sorry, to the right. And let's go ahead and find a clip called Desiree Cortado A. So 09_Desiree, the first one that you see in your media pool. Let's click and hold and let's drag it out into our timeline. And so we now have these 3 clips in our timeline. I'm going to play, so we know what Tonatiuh is saying. Sometimes as a physicist, you really cannot help yourself. I'm going to play for you the other 2. So let's listen.
Yes, that happens a lot.
Okay, yes, that happens a lot. And
Yes, oh my gosh. So being a physicist it is so much of who I am.
okay. And what I want you to do now is I want you to just think about what we saw and rearrange these clips whichever order you want. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to have these clips appear right after the intro as basically the answer of do physicists see physics every day, right? And so I want you to just, at this point, have the freedom to put these in whatever order you want by clicking, holding, and dragging them across the timeline, right? So like you can change where they stand so that you rearrange them and put them in the order that you think would be nice to have them. And once you select the order, then bring them next to each other by clicking, holding, dragging, and making them snap their edges, just like I'm doing here. So basically, the final product will be what I have here, 3 clips right next to each other, but you can place them in whichever order you want. So let's take just a little bit of, using me having played for you the clips, a general idea that you have of what they sound like, place them in any order that you wish to do so. And hopefully that operation shouldn't take too long. So I'm gonna keep moving. I'm going to do something for you. So don't, again, just like we did before with the optional part, if you don't feel comfortable with DaVinci at this point yet, you don't need to replicate this step. I'm just going to, if you notice here, the Caterina clip.
Yes, that happens a lot.
So she first kind of ponders answering her question. So there's some silence there. And then at the end, she says, So I'm going to quickly, again, no need to do this because it won't affect necessarily a lot of the final product, but I'm going to quickly just get rid of those silences to make this little intro sequence of the answers snappier and more dynamic. So I'm just going to go here.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and find exactly where she says yes. I'm going to use my blade and I'm going to cut that and remove that little piece. And then when she says, this is where she says, And of course, whenever you make these things, whenever you make these cuts, then you want to go back and like replay it so that you know that what you did is what you wanted, right? So let me play it.
Yes, that happens a lot.
Perfect. She starts exactly at the yes, she ends exactly at the a lot, and the at the end is gone. So the order that I picked was Tonatiuh, Caterine, and then Desiree. I'm just gonna bring these in next to each other. And let's go ahead and zoom out. You might be at an appropriate zoom level, just basically where I am now, where you can see the 3 clips and you can also see the intro. Let's click and hold outside of the where there's no clips in the timeline, and then drag so that we can select the Desiree, the Caterine, and the Tonatiuh clip all at the same time. And let's click and hold and drag the 3 clips down into V2 and to the left so that they touch the end of the text, right? So that means that our text will end and then Tonatiuh will start saying his answer. So let's play that real quick.
Yeah, sometimes as a physicist, you really cannot help yourself.
Yes, that
Okay, and then it will keep going. So we have created basically a little intro sequence that follows the question that we're asking. So we're asking a question, and then we're asking it very, very directly, and then we're going to continue with our video. So let's go ahead and zoom out so that we can see the entirety of our timeline, the intro, from the intro all the way to where Amber clip ends. And let's go into our media pool and find a clip called 08_Antonio Cortado A. So it's probably the first Antonio clip that you see in your media pool. Let's click, hold, and let's drag that out into our timeline. And let's make that, let's place it into V2. And let's make it be right to where the Desiree clip ends. So it snaps with the with the right edge of the Desiree's clip. So basically, the Antonio's clip is what's going to follow right after the little intro sequence we created. Now we're going to insert yet another clip. So I'm going to play for you 2 clips, actually, and you're going to pick the one that you like, and you're going to insert that one. So I'm going to play to you Caterine Cortado, 06_Caterine Cortado B, and 06 Caterine Cortado C. And I'm going to do that by double clicking on the clip, going into my viewer and hitting play, right? That's how we see what we're working with.
Recently, I became a mom, so watching my baby learning how to move from, rolling up and down and crawling and then walking, it fascinates me how that process works for humans.
Okay, so here she was talking about her baby and the physics of her baby, basically. And then the second one, let's play that.
The breaking of things. That's my topic. That's my thing. I used to break so many things. Still I do. So that fascinates me too. Like when I break a bowl, when I break a toy or something that I really like, or it's not mine from a friend, it's like, oh. So yeah, those type of processes I think about a lot, and I think with physics that's the way you understand those processes and start giving solutions or improvement for those.
Again, so B was about her being a mother, and C was about her breaking things. So whichever one you think is your favorite for this video, we're going to put it into our timeline. I think we should, the space here between Antonio and Tonatiuh is getting a little bit tight. So let's go ahead and move the Amber and the Tonatiuh clips towards the right by, again, clicking and holding on the outside of the clips in the timeline and dragging that box across the clips. And then you can click and hold and drag those clips horizontally to the right so that you make room here. And once you have room, then pick your favorite clip between B and C, and then click it, hold it, and drag it into the timeline. Let's add it into track V2, and let's make it so that it touches the right edge of Antonio's clip. So we're just dragging it and making it snap with Antonio, so that basically Antonio will say something, his answer, and then Caterina's answer will come in. And at that point, we want to close the distance between Tonatiuh's and Amber's clip and the Caterina one. So we can just click here in the timeline and create that little gray box and hit delete on our keyboard so that it brings the Tonatiuh and the Amber clip and snaps them back into the end of Caterina's. So we're almost done with the narrative part of our video. We want to, the one person that's missing from our cast for this video is Desiree. And so now we're going to add Desiree's answer into the timeline. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so that I can see a more like wide, broader perspective of what I'm working with. And we're going to take, let's go ahead and find in our media pool the clip called Desiree Cortado C. So it's, I guess it would be probably the third one that you see once you get to Desiree. So 09_Desiree Cortado C. And let's click and hold and drag that out into the timeline. And let's place it somewhere to the right of Amber's, clip, kind of far away from it. Because something that happened, again, we're kind of role playing here. So something that happened is that when we were watching this Desiree clip, we realized that she was kind of telling us a story in a sort of mysterious kind of way, like building the story. And she's a really good storyteller. So we had this creative idea of saying, actually, how about we don't just have Desiree kind of like give her answer just like everyone else has done it right after Amber. But let's cut her story into pieces and let's sprinkle the story into the rest of the video so that it's sort of like her story is distributed across. And like, if done properly, this could be a technique for like building intrigue in the audience where like they see a clip that says something, but then like it doesn't resolve it. And then they see another clip that builds the story a little bit more. And so that's just a little bit of like, we decided to do that and see if that approach, that kind of like creative approach would work. So what I want you to do at this point is I want you to just create 3 random cuts in the Desiree Cortado. So click on the blade edit tool and then create 3 random cuts in the story so that we end up with 4 independent clips. The real version of the tutorial was going to have you create like real cuts where you would practice dividing the story into pieces. But for the sake of time, we're kind of like we're getting close to the end of the workshop. So I'm just going to do this myself. But for you, in order to follow through to the end, just create random clips, 3 random cuts, and I'm gonna make the cuts where, or in a way that does make sense. So I'm gonna create one here.
At my desk, and there was a light, like a reflection or something. I saw sunlight on my wall here. There's a window. There's a window here.
So I'm gonna cut one here where she says there's a window here. I'm gonna make another cut.
And I couldn't work. I couldn't do my work.
One where she says I couldn't do my work. And then another one somewhere.
And I had one of them in the window. And
okay, and then another one here. So for you, just create 3 random cuts, and we will have 4 clips. And what we want to do at this point is to distribute these clips across throughout the other clips that are happening. So we're going to do that very simply by clicking on the clip that we want to move. So the first clip in the Desiree story, moving it over to track 3 so that it snaps with the part where we want it to appear, which is the end of Antonio's clip. And then we're going to select the rest of the clips that are to the right of that. So Amber's, Donatius, and Caterina's. And we're going to click and hold and drag them out of the way. And they will actually, the snapping tool will make it easy for us because it will snap exactly to the to make just enough room for Desiree's clip to fit in there. So we're going to move that. There's now room, and we're going to click and hold the Desiree clip, and we're going to drag it down into the V2. So now it's snugly fit between Antonio and Caterina. Same thing for the second Desiree clip. Move it to the intersection or interface between Caterina's and Donatius. Click, hold, and drag Amber's and Donatius. Get them out of the way just enough to fit Desiree's and bring that back in. Finally, for the third one, do the same operation. Move Desiree's clip to the ending of Donatius and the beginning of Amber's. Get Amber's out of the way and drag in Desiree's. And Desiree's last one will just go and fit to the on the right edge of Amber's. And so now we have essentially sprinkled Desiree's story throughout the video. At this point, I can see that my solid color is only restricted to like a small region. So let's go ahead and fix that by just using the trim tool. So, if you're zoomed out enough, you should be able to see the entirety of your timeline. And all you have to do is go into your find your trim tool by going to the edge of the solid color, clicking, holding, and dragging that out to the end of the Desiree clip. And on the left side, clicking, holding, and dragging down all the way till it meets the intro video. And it'll snap to it. We also want to add an outro sequence, and that was going to be really quick. We're going to go into our media pool, and we're going to find a clip there that's called outro.mp4. And we're going to use the same technique that we used for the intro, where we double click on it. And now that it's present in the viewer panel on the left, we can hover over it, find the film strip icon, click and hold so that we only are dragging the video part of it out into our timeline. And I know that this little preview window kind of makes it maybe hard to know where you're placing it. So you can just place it somewhere on the right, somewhere to the right of the Desiree's clip. And once it's there, you can click on it, hold, and then drag it back so that it snaps with the ending of the Desiree's clip. So now we have an outro sequence. And at this point in the slides that I'm sharing with you, there will be a little step here where we make a nice little tweak to the outro. So I encourage you to go and take a look at those. We're going to skip that one for the sake of time. It's just a little flourish. But now I want to quickly talk about sound. So I'm going to, at this part, just watch me do this. And basically, I'm going to show you the importance of sound. I found through Free Music Archive this song called Hell Slime. It's kind of maybe like sounds like metal or something. I'm going to click that, hold, and drag it into our timeline so that we now have a soundtrack. And I'm going to put it to near to where Amber's clip is. And I'm going to play this for you to show you what Amber's interview sounds like with Hell Slime as the soundtrack.
It's really silly. So yesterday I was thinking about how the fan, it's actually a physics product.
So Amber sounds like there's something dark happening there. Like, even though we know that she's saying something like really lighthearted about like it's silly that she thinks that the other day she thought about how the fan is a physical process. We can't help, because the soundtrack is there, to just get this sense of dread. And so soundtracks are super important to change the tone of our video and give it dynamicism and all of that. So I'm just going to delete the Hell Slime, and we're going to add the soundtrack to our clip. So let's go ahead and find a clip called soundtrack.mp3. It's like probably all the way down at the bottom of your media pool. And let's click and hold it and drag it into our timeline. And let's put it in A1, which should be empty. If A1 isn't empty for some reason for you, just place it in A3 or somewhere that it doesn't intersect with your other audio tracks, because that would replace the audio that you have for your interviews. And let's place it there. It can be anywhere horizontally. Once it's placed, you can click it, drag it, and like move it so that it snaps to the left edge of your video. And that way it's going to start as soon as your video starts. And then let's go ahead. Of course, we made a really long soundtrack because some of our videos, it's just looping. So some of our videos are like really long in this project, Claustrofísicos. So we had a long soundtrack, but we can just, for our purposes, go all the way to the right edge of that soundtrack. We can scroll over there, find the trimming tool, and click and drag and like bring it down so that it snaps with the end of our video. Now I'm going to do an operation that I just want you to watch. I'm going to do something real quick because just like I showed you with the music, the Hell Slime soundtrack, not just different soundtracks can change the impact of our video, but within a soundtrack, you can have like percussion, you can have changes in the sort of like the flow of the song, and that can help you wherever you place those things, wherever you place beats and things like that, can change the dynamicism and the things that happen in our soundtrack. So I'm just going to illustrate to you that by our soundtrack has this this part where like it starts kind of minimalistic. So I'm gonna play it.
Me. It is so much of who I am.
So I studied,
And then it has a part that is more, and then after that, a bass line comes in.
and I started thinking of like the interactions that people have within them.
Right, and so we were going to use that bass line to indicate to our audience the video is now starting. Also, something that you don't necessarily have to do, but I'm going to do it real quick, is that when I played it, you noticed probably that the sound was really, the song was really loud, and then we could not hear our speakers. So I'm going to quickly just click on my soundtrack, go to my inspector, and at that point, I can adjust the audio settings, the audio properties. And I'm going to decrease the volume of my soundtrack down to -18. And I'm going to play it again, and you can notice that
Galaxies, and I started thinking of like their interactions.
now my soundtrack is at a level that is more reasonable. It's still there in the back behind the scenes, but it doesn't block what my speakers are saying. And I'm going to quickly just make that bass line, the beginning of that bass line, make it match exactly where Antonio starts speaking, because that's where I want the audience to know, oh, this is where things get going, right? So I'm gonna do that quickly without even saying what I'm doing, just because we're gonna start running out of time soon. So I'm just gonna do it very quickly. And you don't have to replicate this part for the rest of what we need to do with this video, so it's okay.
So I study Galaxies.
But you can notice that what I'm doing is basically the same sort of like scanning and tracking and refining movements that we have done for most of our cuts before.
So
And now I know, yes, indeed, my baseline starts when he starts speaking. I'm just going to readjust my soundtrack here because I did something that cut it a little bit. And then I'm going to go back to the end to make sure that my soundtrack will end when my video ends. Because I think that, yeah, that changed it a little bit. So I'm going to trim, again, recovering some of the soundtrack that I had lost, and bring it out to the outro. Last thing I'm going to do, and again, no need to replicate this because we're pretty much almost done. I'm going to add some lower thirds. And this is important because it's more information for our viewers, right? We're telling them who is speaking. Lower third refers to the lower third, like the name says, of the screen. And it's usually utilized to add the person's name and things like that. So I created animations for each of the people where the name pops up and then it goes away. And we're just going to, I'm going to insert these. No need to do that on your own if you are still kind of like getting a hold of all of this stuff. But I'm going to insert, I'm going to insert Antonio's. I'm going to insert the CRS. Caterines. Again, I'm just double clicking, going to this little thing, hovering over and finding the finding the film strip icon and then inserting only video. I'm going to find Tonatius. And I'm going to find Ambars. Of course, Desiree shows up multiple times, but we only need to introduce her once, right? And so at this point, I want us all to close our media pool, close our inspector, and go to the full extent soon, because we are done, and I want us to admire this piece of work that we created. It's really satisfying when you're editing and you can then at the end see the timeline and like all these little pieces that you put together. So, you know, however much you were able to follow, be proud of yourself. This was your first editing, and some of you maybe your first video editing job. So congratulate yourself. The last thing that we want to do is to export our video, right? So I'm quickly gonna go. I'm just gonna actually I'm just gonna. Sorry, something weird happened with my soundtrack. I'm just adjusting something real quick. But in order to export, we're going to use the one other page within DaVinci that I want to bring awareness to you, which is the delivery page or deliver page. So if you go hover down and you can transition between pages, if you go to deliver, that's where you export your video. This is where you want to go once you're done to share with someone, upload it, create a new file, basically, right? So like our files have all been sort of referred to by DaVinci from the source files that are in our folder. But at this point, it will create a completely new file that's independent that contains all of these edits that we made, all of these things that we put together into one piece, right? And there's a lot of important properties here for exporting, but for today, we're just going to go ahead and make you aware of the fact that there's presets. So we could easily just go to the YouTube preset at 1080p, which is the intended resolution that we want, and at 30 frames per second, which is the original frame rate of our videos that we started with. All you have to do is really change the name of the file. So I'm going to say APS 2021 workshop, and give it a location. So I'm going to just browse here, tell it to save it in my downloads. And in order to export with DaVinci, you have to add your video to the render queue. And then once you have it in the render queue, then don't do this. If you really are following through step by step, don't do this now, but you would have to hit render all, and that would start the process of rendering your video and creating a new file, right? We're not gonna do this now because it will take probably like 5 to 10 minutes. Rendering can sometimes even take overnight when you're making a video that's really long or heavy. And so, you know, we're not going to do that today. And it can also like take up resources from your computer. So we still want you to be able to experience the Zoom call. But I still want to show you what we created today. So I'm just going to go back into the edit page, and we're going to see a preview of the video. It's very close to what you would have seen if you had exported it. But it's going to maybe not have, some of the animations might be choppy and things like that. That's what the rendering process would do. But let's go ahead and admire the video today. And that will be pretty much the end of the tutorial. I think we're going to go just a few minutes late because I want to end with a slide telling you a little bit of information. But let's play this video and admire it.
Yeah, sometimes as a physicist, you really cannot help yourself.
Yes, that happens a lot.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So being a physicist makes me, it is so much of who I am.
So I study galaxies. And so when I go to Costa Rica and I fly into San Jose, I get into the airport, the Juan Santa Maria airport, and I drive towards the capital. And I see people walking very close to one another, like they have their own paths. So I start thinking of galaxies as people, or yeah, people as galaxies, and I start thinking of like their interactions that people have within themselves in that region, in their past lives, how all their experiences have influenced the person that they are today and right now. And that to me is very similar to how I study galaxies, how galaxies interactions and history has influenced them to become what they are right now.
The other day, for instance, I was standing here at my desk and then there was a light, like a reflection or something. I saw sunlight on my wall here. There's a window here.
The breaking of things. That's my topic. That's my thing. I used to break so many things. Still I do. So that fascinates me too. Like when I break a bowl, when I break a toy or something that I really like, or it's not mine from a friend. It's like, oh. So yeah, those type of processes I think about a lot, and I think with physics that's the way you understand those processes and start giving solutions or improvement for those.
So where did the light, the light can't be there. And I looked at my bookshelf and I don't have anything extraordinarily shiny back there. And I couldn't work. I couldn't do my work.
There's another anecdote, a very similar anecdote. James Clerk Maxwell, who's famous for Maxwell's equations and explaining electromagnetism in mathematical terms. And so he was actually the first one to discover that the light is an electromagnetic wave. And so the anecdote goes that he discovered this as a solution to a mathematical equation. He found what the speed of light should be. And that night he went out for a date. And same story, he was sitting with, I think then they married, with his future wife in the park, and it was a beautiful night. And so his partner asked him, looking at the stars, what do you think when you look at the stars? And his answer was, well, right now I think that I am the only one who understands what the light coming from the stars is. So we're very geeky.
Because I had to figure out where this light was coming from. And I had to sit here and think about it. And it was amazing, actually, because what it was I have these two amazing little ecosystems in a flask. This is called a culture flask. And so they have algae at the bottom and shrimp inside. And so I had one of them under my desk, and then I had one of them in the window.
It's really silly. So yesterday I was thinking about how the fan, it's actually a physics process. Like it has to be in a shape that push particles so you can feel that wind coming to you.
And what was happening is the sun was setting and the sun was coming in, hitting the inside of this, so it was total internal reflection. So then it was bouncing off of this onto this other one, which was then bouncing onto my wall. And it was a whole, like, it took me a good while to figure out what was happening, but that's just how I am. And the quarantine has kind of made it worse because now I'm always thinking about physics in my house.
All right, so that's the end of it. I apologize because something weird happened with the intro part when I moved my soundtrack. It kind of like overlapped the text, but if you follow the tutorial, you should be able to see a more pristine representation of that. I just want to end with one slide, and I apologize that there's no time for questions, but I'm free to stick around if anybody wants to do so as well. There's just a little bit more. There's homework, so feel free to finish tweaking the video, export it, and send me the file. I'll be happy to receive that file and give you feedback. There's a little bit of a challenge because I purposefully made our clips that are between the Desiree clips a little bit longer than they should be. They're a little bit too draggy. They drag on a little bit. So the challenge is to make a 2 to 3 minute version of this video, and again, send it to me for feedback. And if you want to build more skills, then follow the slides version of this tutorial, because there will be some bonus content on animating text, doing keyframing, which is an important concept in animation and editing, and doing background noise correction. So with that, I'll just leave you my email. I can stick around if anyone wants to ask questions, and we're done.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was great. I had some technical problems a bit,